Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Happy Monday, everybody. Today we're going to take a look at the astrology for the week ahead. That's July 14th through the 20th. The big news this week is Mercury turning retrograde in the sign of Leo. We're going to have some good content on that transit this week and today. I'll be taking a look at the fixed signs in horoscopes today. Those fixed signs are going to be receiving this Mercury retrograde in one of the angular houses. So we'll do that. I'll tell you what's on my altar this week. And because this Mercury retrograde really is the only major transit of the week, we'll spend a little bit of time prepping ourselves for that today. I'm going to take you back in time to the last period in which Mercury went retrograde in Leo, which for me, doing a little journaling work, always something I like to do. I'll give you some tips on how to do that today. So I hope that this will be a good way to start your week. As always, before we get into it, remember to like and subscribe. We did some research about a year ago and found out that there's a lot of people who watch the channel regularly but are not subscribed. It means a lot to us and helps us grow immensely. When you give us the like and subscribe. So thank you for that. You can find transcripts of any of these daily talks on the website, which is nightlightastrology.com. Go over to the website, couple of things to turn you on to. Go to events page, click on in-person events. If you want to join us for a fall equinox gathering here in Minneapolis or a winter solstice gathering, both will be held at the Grapevine Collective. This is looking forward to September and all the way to December, but mark your calendars for those. Come join us. We'd love to be with you. Then under events page, go to live talks. You'll see that all of my monthly webinars for the entire rest of the year are now listed. August is on the 7th house. So if you missed the 9th house talk, you can still pick up the recording of that. Go to the shop page and you can pick up any of the webinars I've done. There are a ton of them because I do one a month and have been for a couple of years now. There's a really nice library of growing talks that you can purchase and get the recordings of. Also master classes and other good stuff. So check that out. 7th house is the talk for August. We'll be taking an in-depth look at the 7th house and learning how to read that in our own charts. We'll be talking about Mercury paired with all the other planets, Venus paired with all the other planets, the 2nd house, the 11th house, in the remaining webinars for this year. So I hope to see you there. Enrollment season for the next year 1 course will begin later in the autumn. So otherwise, there's nothing much going on right now. Where did I go? Okay, wait, there we are. All right. On that note, let's turn our attention to the real-time clock. Let's take a look at this, this week's astrology. Okay, so here we are, Monday, July 14th, and the news of this week is pretty simple. We are looking at the 18th on Friday of this week as the day that Mercury stations and turns retrograde in the sign of Leo, right in the middle of Leo, the 15th degree. If you have planets in the middle degrees of the fixed signs, you're going to be getting conjunction, square, or opposition from this Mercury retrograde. That's something to watch for. I'll go over more on the Mercury retrograde here shortly. The other thing that's happening, let's mark our calendars there. That's Friday, July 18th, the very end of this week, Mercury turning retrograde. Now, Mercury will also make a sextile to Venus on the exact same day, while Venus is in the superior position within the sextile and in Venus, in Mercury's sign. So there's reception there, a nice little aspect between Venus and Mercury to start the Venus or the Mercury retrograde cycle under. We'll be looking at that as the week goes on as well. Otherwise, there are no major astrological transits this week. So we're just talking about Friday being a Mercury retrograde with a little Mercury sextile to Venus at the outset. Now, just to give you a feel for what we're going, I don't know why my screen keeps doing that, but just to give you a feel for what we are going to be doing this week, we will do some horoscopes for those Mercury retrogrades. We're going to do some journaling and go back in time, even beyond today's little exercise that I'll give you to start the week. So there'll be some coverage on Mercury retrograde from a few different angles. This week, I am also, as you guys are listening to this, I am on vacation for my birthday. My birthday is the 16th of July. And so every year, typically this week, we have a family member who has a cabin. We try to kind of retreat and just chill out as a family. So with that and the fact that there's barely anything happening astrologically this week, I have a few rewind episodes that we'll be doing. One on Mercury in the sign of Leo to add to this conversation about Mercury's retrograde in Leo. So yeah, so I'll be putting that in this week as well. But for people who really want to focus on this Mercury retrograde, that's a planet and profile episode on the meaning of Mercury in Leo that I think will contribute nicely to the theme of the week. So anyway, on that note, let us circle back around to this Mercury retrograde and let's talk about it a little bit more in terms of major themes to watch for. And again, more on this later in the week, but right off the top, Mercury turning retrograde in Leo, the sign of the sun, as the sun approaches its own temple in the sign of Leo. What an interesting signature, and a Mercury retrograde that will therefore likely deal with solar topics. What are solar topics? Well, let's think about it energetically. The sun is associated with the word spirit, and spirit is sort of like the living force of the eternal soul. Like the spirit soul are words that are paired together to refer to that spark of us that is immortal, that was never born, that will never die, that transmigrates from one lifetime to another, one dimension and galaxy to another, perhaps. But whatever way you look at it, spirit typically refers to the eternal entity that is dwelling here in this body in this lifetime. The soul is another word that has some different connotations, but similar meanings. So when we think energetically about a Mercury retrograde in the sign of the sun, the sign of spirit, we think about what gives us life. It's a funny thing that as immortal beings, we even think about what gives us life. We are life. We are alive. We can't not be alive. And yet the life we live can either put us in touch with that vibrant living force that is our true nature, or it can make us feel distant from it. I mean, let's put it this way. When we're living in touch with something of our creative essence, we feel alive. Of course, on one level, we are alive even when we feel dead, and this is the great lesson taught to us by mystics and archetypal experiences like the dark night of the soul. We realize, oh, even when I feel dead, I'm alive. Even when I die, I resurrect. Still, in this lifetime, one of the goals of living a fulfilling life is to be in touch with that vibrant living essence that we are. A Mercury retrograde in the sign of Leo can begin a process of reflection or revision or careful consideration about what we're doing, what direction our life is moving in, and how much our life resembles that living, vibrant life force that that is our true nature. The sign of Leo says, look, you're going to die someday, but you might as well live with a feeling of having your finger on the pulse of creation. We think of Leo sometimes as a creative sign, but it's not creative necessarily in a super Venusian sense. It's creative in the sense that we all live for something beyond the death of this mortal body. The sun is rapidly declining or descending during this time of year, but it's still the middle of the summer and we're still on the light half of the year. This therefore pits the image of eternality against death and immortality of the sun. It's sort of like the sun at high noon. The sun at high noon has nowhere to go but down, and yet here it is at the top. So the question becomes, what do we live for despite the eventuality of the setting? And that's a question of spirit. Are we in touch with what makes us feel alive? What gives us that finger on the pulse sensation? So I would think very broadly of a Mercury retrograde in the sign of Leo as a question about vibrancy, about enthusiasm. Enthusiasm, one of my favorite words all time, entheos, the etymological roots, the God within. So are we in touch with that divine living force? We are creatively participating in the unfolding of reality, whether we like it or not, but it sure does help to like it. Or it sure does help to be in touch with it rather than feeling dead where we're contributing, but we don't feel like we are. That's living under an illusion that is the very source of depression and anxiety for most of us. So how can we shift things to feel more alive, to know that we are a part of the living fabric of reality? Good questions, deep existential questions for Mercury retrograde in the sign of Leo. Now, On the other hand, all kinds of revisions with respect to other solar archetypes can take place. Fathers, leaders, central figures of authority or power. Remember, we have a new moon coming up in just a week after this Mercury retrogradation on the 18th, in which we will have a new moon in Leo opposite Pluto in Aquarius. So this Mercury retrograde takes place right alongside of some very powerful dynamics for the sun in the next lunar cycle. I suspect that questions of authority and power, changes or transitions of leadership, are themes that we can watch for, both personally and obviously collectively. But on the personal level, this may come down to, where am I needed? Where is my voice or my abilities or my skills or my creative essence contributing positively or powerfully, or where am I actually making an impact? Versus where do I feel voiceless or unseen or undermined or disrespected? Those questions that circle around loyalty to a cause that lives in our hearts, as well as a feeling of being dignified and seen and respected, which is important for us as beings who have egos. Doing away with the ego doesn't typically mean that we stop needing to be loved or seen. It means that we have different ways of evaluating our self-worth other than how much we're seen or loved. It's like, it's not a sin to have an ego. It's about how we walk with one. So this whole Mercury retrograde may also bring up issues of how to walk with an ego, how to make sure that we have a healthy ego versus one that's maybe problematic in some way. A lot of that may come down to, are we being seen, loved, heard? Do we carry creative potency in the different arenas of our life? And if not, then why? And how can we change things? And if so, but the volume is too loud and maybe we need a little bit more humility, how do we achieve that humility without also experiencing shame? Or, sometimes we think in order to have an experience of humility that we have to get down on ourselves. So I don't think that's necessarily the case. Anyway, just some thoughts here for us today. Let's take a look at the fixed rising signs in terms of our horoscopes to start the week. And then, like I said, we'll do some more horoscopes later in the week as well. I'm going to isolate everything from my perspective right now, except for Mercury. Give me just a second here. Oh my gosh, no, I'm not. I'm not doing that at all because I forgot to give you your journaling assignment. We're going to come back to horoscopes in just a second. Sorry, guys. All right. So here is the retrograde taking place on the 18th. But what I want to take you back to that's so interesting along the archetypal lines of everything I was just talking about is the last Mercury retrograde in Leo. Now, we had a bit of one last summer, but we're in the midst of the fire sign retrogrades for Mercury. So we're going to go back to the last time that we had a solid Mercury retrograde in Leo, and that was July of 2018. Here's what I find this so interesting. Mercury turned retrograde around July 26th of 2018, and then its retrogradation lasted, you go on into August, and it turned direct right about August 19th. So we're talking late July through late August. We had about 3 weeks or so of a Mercury retrograde in Leo. Now, prior to the current cycle of fire sign retrogrades for Mercury, this was the last time that Mercury retrograded in Leo, save a bit last summer in 24. But kind of going back to that last cycle is the point. I have to share this with you guys. I thought, well, let's see if this is worthwhile, like a journaling exercise that brings anything up that's meaningful for me, because usually if I can find something pretty easily, then most of the time students, clients can as well. That's how I've seen astrological cycles convey. If I can do an exercise pretty easily, if I can have my wife sit down and do it with me or whatever, then yeah, most people can probably find something. It's not like it's an obscure cycle, right? It's a recurring Mercury retrograde in a specific sign and house of our charts. So I'm a Taurus rising. This took place in my 4th house in the summer of 2018, just days before my wife gave birth to our younger daughter. And I find that really super interesting because in my chart, that takes place in the 4th house, the place of home and family And Leo in the fourth for me has certainly had a lot to do with the destiny of parenting and the story arc of my life as it pertains to my father, my grandfather, the archetype of fathering in general. And my daughter, Summer, was born a Leo sun with the Mercury retrograde in Leo, right? And this was a time for me where, because the first daughter that came in 2015 was really like, okay, now I'm a dad. When the second one came, I'm like, oh, I'm a girl dad now. I've got two girls, and the destiny for the rest of my life is forever different. My identity as a father is so it's anchored in now. It's rooted in, right? So I found that this Mercury retrograde in my fourth house was a really significant one to revisit. How will this summer bring back up for me themes of parenting and fatherhood? I think that's really, really fascinating. Now, I'm not anticipating having another kid. That would be a surprise. But you can see the fruitfulness of going back and looking at the same whole sign house. So when we do horoscopes later in the week, I will remind you of this, and we'll go back to some previous cycles because you can track these sequentially backward in time. So I'll give you even one more beyond this to track. But that's a meaningful way of making some connections between Mercury retrograde in Leo in the past and this current retrograde we're about to experience. All right, on that note, let's start with Taurus. So family, home, roots, parenting. If you're a Taurus rising, you've got this Mercury retrograde taking place around things like ancestral karma, parental karma, home and family, living environment. So what do things look like right there? That's where, and this can be about things that are changing. I mean, I've seen Mercury retrogrades in the fourth house where people are like, oh, we need a new air conditioner, or, you know, whatever, something mechanical that needs changing, or you're doing some renovation of a room in the house. Or so it can be really pretty mundane as well. But also look for things like parenting, parental karma, fathers, dad karma, and things related to your living environment or your inner life, your private inner sphere in general. Okay, let's move along. And we're going to put Leo on the ascendant next fixed rising sign. So the reason I do these, if you're new to the channel, is that at the start of the week, I like to look at whatever signs have the big transit of the week happening in an angular house. So this week, Mercury retrograde, we're looking at the fixed signs because that's where the angularity is at with this transit. So Leo's identity, body, health, that question of vitality and spirit, so important here for Mercury retrograde in your first house. What makes you feel alive? Mentally, verbally, in terms of self-expression, in terms of health and body, where is the life force? What changes are required right now so that you feel like you're being more real or authentic? What application of skills can you make in your life given whatever's happening right now? Or where are you being asked to change or adjust something about yourself or your personality, reconfiguring yourself, your health, and identity overall would be the subject of this Mercury retrograde in your first. Now going on to Scorpios, the 10th house, career, public vocation, the direction of your calling or destiny with respect to work in the world, status, reputation, public notoriety, the workplace environment, what changes are happening in how you do your job, where you do your job, who you work with, who's in charge, what authority do you have or carry, who do you answer to, what changes are happening in the workplace, or how are you changing your thinking with respect to your engagement with the public, civic, social arenas of the world, which is a question that may be relevant for you even if you're retired. Let's go on to Aquarius. So finally, for Aquarius rising, we have the Mercury retrograde in your 7th house, place of relationships. This is a house that when Mercury retrogrades in, the question is, what are the conversations right now around love and relationships? What are you revising or taking a second look at? Or what agreements are you reconsidering around love, sex, marriage, relationships, interpersonal dynamics of any kind? Mercury can bring about revisions in relationships, new ways of thinking. It can have you looking at something from the past. It can bring you back to an old familiar theme or pattern that needs to be re-explored or examined. Mercury retrograde in the 7th can also bring up important changes for spouses or partners that are tied to you, but maybe not about the relationship itself. So watch for Mercury bringing about a season of change with respect to relationships or things happening in the lives of the people who are closest to you. That's what I'm tracking for the fixed signs. So on that note, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you what's on my altar this week. You can take some inspiration from that if you wish, and that will round out our talk today with that. Okay, so let me show you what's on my altar today. I'm going to switch the view so you can see it. So you'll see right now on my altar that I have a stick of incense burning. Now, this is something that is a staple for many people in their altar practice. I'm using it today, although I might use it alongside of other things week by week, just to illustrate how simple a daily offering can be. Whatever's on your altar, one way of connecting heaven to earth is to use a fragrant scent. The smoke is, kind of connects us to the element of air, I like to think. The earth, the fragrance of the incense, the fire that's used to light, the air rising up. Got a lot of elements at play, actually, in the simple lighting of a stick of incense. Of course, it smells good and can be a way of just sort of purifying a space. I like to use it in my altar practice, not all the time because I'm a little sensitive to smoke in the room all the time. But one of my favorite things about being in India when I was there a couple times on pilgrimage was just, you don't walk into many temples where there aren't just a lot of sticks of incense burning, and what a purifying, fragrant, uplifting smell it is. And then there's a way that scent and the connection of those elements just comes with us into our world, so that we don't see, just the altar and incense that is sacred, but we start thinking about the smells, the fragrances, the earth, the sky around us as living, vibrant parts of the divine that we are also a part of. So anyway, I'll leave it there for all of you today. I hope that is inspiring. Remember, whatever I have on my altar each week, I'm not suggesting, well, you have to do this. It's just, to show you what I am doing for the week and how I'm making that connection through my altar. Something I highly recommend for people who are interested in astrology, primarily because being intentional, relational, participatory, that should be far more the goal for us as we use the astrology to reflect and walk a kind of moving meditation. That's it. It's not just what's happening for me. Why is this happening to me? Me, like a cosmic gossip column that's all about just me and my attachments and concerns. There's a deeply personal part of astrology that's meant to connect us more deeply to our everyday life. But we want to make our life a prayerful, meditative, reflective experience that connects us to the soul of ourselves and of everyone else and everything else in this beautiful, enchanted cosmos. So everything on my channel is really about trying to help build that bridge. And I hope that this will be just one more thing. Another thing that I'm excited about, I think it'll be later on in August, that we'll start having once monthly meetings for quiet meditation on Sundays. So that will be coming up. July is a month where there's a couple birthdays in the family, and it's a month typically where I try to spend more time with my family, like cancer season and all of that good stuff. So we will be getting to that soon enough. But anyway, that's it for today. I hope you're having a nice start to your week, and we will see you again soon. Bye, everyone.